Crescent Mills community. Benefits would be new infrastructure and new location of the infrastructure nearer to the source, reduction of iron and manganese in the water supply, and it would benefit water supply and quality. They have $50,000 in match plus an in-kind labor. This is Dr. Levine from Crescent Mills of the pen there. And finally, we have the community water tank inspection project. This will benefit Crescent Mills and Greenville. It is the water, part of the water storage system for those two communities, and this project will benefit the water supply and quality project in the area, and they have a match of about $30,000. And here's the location. Just a pen above the community there. Just a little bit closer. And then we have a project out of Calpine, the Sierra Water Works District Number 1. This is an infrastructure upgrade project, and it is the district-wide leak survey and pipeline replacement project. So it will benefits include water conservation, water supply, and water quality. And it's about a $500,000 project. This is just a map of Calpine. It will go, the leak detection would go through most of the community. And Paul Rose is here if there are specific questions about the project that we didn't discuss last time. We also have 3 tribal projects that have not gone through. They were just submitted today, so they haven't gone through the process, and they're not in the agenda packet, so would not be for approval for inclusion in the plan today. Katrina wanted to do a presentation on them.
Sure.
And then we'll include them on the agenda for our next meeting.
Okay. I'm sorry, we've really been hustling on a lot of things. So the first one is right now what I'm calling the Genesee Valley Watershed Improvement Project and Tribal Springs Restoration. And this was a project that came out of the TEK symposium that we held in Genesee Valley last year, or not last year, 5 years ago, on Feather River Land Trust property on what's known as the Davis Ranch. And that was to bring together all the people that make decisions and do work on the ground to that place as kind of a pilot to figure out how to work better together, how to integrate tribal elders and community, and then prioritize what we wanted collectively to focus on. And then one of the one outcome that everybody stood by was springs, water. Surprise. And so with the Forest Service and Audubon and the planning department and so many people in attendance, springs and water was the primary outcome. And so out of that, Audubon started putting together a forest health plan and of developing partnerships. And so that's now morphed into a landscape scale 33,000 acre project, including some of the uplands areas above Genesee Valley and springs. And so we're still looking at how to integrate tribal knowledge into that. And Brad Graves from Plumas Audubon has taken on some of the NEPA and CEQA processes. I don't know, Brad, if you would like to say anything more about that?
We're almost finished with all that. We've got the NEPA decision memo, and CEQA is going to be submitted hopefully soon.
And again, that's the capacity and funding have been obstacles, but it's a project that we would like to see supported going forward. And the Forest Service has been a large part of that. Also, I do believe that there's a field trip hosted by the Forest Service up to the Baker Cypress region of that area next month in July. So the second one is the Middle Fork Feather River Headwaters Tribal Big Time Phase 2. We had the first big time in probably 100 years in Sierra Valley, in the Ross Meadows of Sierra Valley, on the Middle Fork, on the corridor of the wild and scenic Feather River, Middle Fork of the Feather River, in May. And we did tribal outreach to the Washoe tribe and Paiute tribe and Maidu community as people, tribal communities that used to inhabit that area. And as we're trying to move forward, like with your Ramelia allotment and the Middle Fork and develop a plan from that wild and scenic corridor all the way down to the Feather River, it didn't make sense to to try to do that with just the Maidu community when there are so many other tribes that are part of it. So we have tribal participation from the Washoe tribe, Paiute elder, one of our elders who is also part of the ranching community in Indian Valley. Until recently, he lives in Shores, Nevada. John Smith, he's 97 years old, participated. Rick Roberti and his mother Helen. And so, and then there was a film being put together by the Friends of Pumice Wilderness, and the Feather River Land Trust helped support the event. The film is highlighting the 50th year designation of the wildland scenic Feather River, so they're really trying to capture a feature-length film, all the different uses of that river, which is all the uses that we're talking about. And so,
How far does the Washoe tribe come this way? Sierra Valley?
Sierra Valley.
That's it?
Yeah, well, then we had intertribal trade agreements. So, for example, up in Canyon Dam, one of my elders, Lily Baker, who was a renowned Maidu basket weaver, took me up there in 1992 to a place in near Canyon Dam that's got a bear grass gathering area that her mother and her ancestry had gathered there for hundreds of years, and showed me the area, and she said, this is the Pit River place, and this is the Paiute place, this is the Washoe place, this is the Wintu place, and this is our place. And so this is where you gather, and to this day you don't go into other people's places. So there were intertribal trade agreements that stand to today, till today, and we want to reconnect some of that. So although their territorial boundaries as far as yearly living came into Sierra Valley, we had trade agreements that stretched much wider. And so those are some of the things that we're trying to reestablish with what we call TEK. And TEK, again, is place-based, and it's by the people that are most closely associated with that. And that's part of the challenge is you can't just contact a Maidu tribe and say, well, it's Maidu territory, because the people that you contact may know nothing about that particular place. And so,
Perhaps our current Washington DC folks might want to, go and be part of this project, because the idea, this is your place to trade, this is our place to trade.
standard trade agreement?
Yeah.
I will.
Are we gonna get any tariffs in there?
So the big time.
I thought you said you were not being paid.
So the big time, we have participation from Machuca, the Machuca tribe out of Susanville, Enterprise Rancheria out of Pico, and some of the tribal people. And Doug, I'd love to introduce you to some of them. They expressed a desire to meet you. I advocated
Welcome.
to develop that relationship. And so we do have a planning committee as an outcome of that, a tribal planning committee. So and absolutely, Russell, I know that you said that, but there was a seriousness to it. And maybe it would behoove us all
Qualify that with rest.
There was.
to have some recognition of some of that. And so we will extend an invitation to them for next year's big time. And there was some state representation as well.
Is the BIA involved at all with anything you're doing?
Yes, I'm doing most of this through the California Indian Water Commission, and so the BIA is our major partner. And then there's other tribes participating in that process, all the way to the Southern Sierras at this point. So the third one is the tribal outreach and consultation on reintroduction of salmon into the Seneca Reach of the North Fork Feather River. So we did a field tour last month with the National Marine Fisheries and some of the other folks to look at the possibility of reintroducing salmon by trap and haul from Lake Oroville up into the Seneca Reach, and then the recapture of the semonids in the springtime and retransporting them down and back, and looking at the feasibility, because the Seneca Reach maintains a low water temperature, a temperature cool enough to do that, and then also the pools are clean enough, they don't have much sedimentation, and there's enough pools that are deep enough to be able to do that. So they're continuing to look at the feasibility of that, so Steve Edelson from National Marine Fisheries, and then there were a number of other partners, the whitewater rafting folks out of Chico and other groups that have been active in the Feather River region. So again, this we're asking for, we're developing this process in conjunction with the California Indian Water Commission. Is there?
I'm glad you picked up on that. I really do think that, you know, Bureau of Indian Affairs and feds have such a huge role to play in tribes that has to be in consideration in these projects. Because of the relationship between tribes and the federal government, not necessarily the state government, because tribes really have been historically regulated by the feds, not necessarily any other.
Yeah, that federal to federal relationship, the reason that tribes have a federal to federal relationship is if they are federally recognized, they become a federal nation. And so that's why they, that federal to federal exists and why it's so important. But what's happening is some of the federally recognized tribes in recent discussions are looking at helping support the non-federally recognized people of California, which the majority of tribal people in California are non-federally recognized. And so we're looking, and that's part of what the California Indian Water Commission was formed to do, because the Water Commission has the same status as a federally recognized tribe. So non-tribal group or non-federally recognized tribal groups can apply for funding and have the same consultation status as a recognized tribe if they go through the Indian Water Commission. And so we're looking at a form of empowerment, and we are holding a tribal forum. It's just California tribal folks next month in Oroville, and it's sponsored by the Region 5 Forest Service and Sierra Nevada Conservancy. And that's to have tribal conversations around water and land issues, fire, and how to interface more effectively, look at the capacity that we need. And it's very similar to the IRWM process, where you have the IRWMs meet throughout the region and throughout the state, and tribes need a very similar process where we're meeting throughout our regions and throughout the state, and how to effectively engage in IRWMs, state water resources control board issues, fire issues, and what our next steps would be.
When's that? Do you have a date for that meeting?
That's July 18th and 19th in Oroville.
Sorry, I'm out of town.
Well, it's California tribal people only. There's no
Oh,
agency.
okay. No worries, no worries.
And the successive meetings will include agency people. But the first one is like, why would you want to sit in a tribal meeting while we're hashing out all that stuff? Any more than I want to sit in one of your meetings while you're hashing out the stuff.
Make sure you get some funding though. For your IRWM equivalent.
But once we prioritize those and can figure out a path of how we want to move forward, then yes, we want to engage and work together.
In our area of concern, how many tribes, you can just go percentage-wise, that are recognized? I mean, would you say like 80% or 20%?
Are going to be involved in this?
No, that are federally recognized.
I don't even know. I just know like in Plymouth County, the majority of people, Maidu residents in Plymouth County are not federally recognized. Yeah. We have one federally recognized tribe in Plymouth County, which is the Greenville Rancheria, and it's great for them. But that leaves the rest of us not recognized.
Yeah, and I would say that the majority of the tribes, I think, in our watershed, in our area, are not recognized. Is that an accurate statement, do you think?
I think it's accurate, although Enterprise Rancheria, Moortown Rancheria, a little bit of Berry Creek and a little bit of Susanville have adopted some of us, but we don't have the same rights, that we don't have voting rights or anything else, so it's.
I'm glad you're recognized.
It's a discussion of debate in tribal communities.
Thank you. And for all of you who may not live and breathe the Feather River and its tributaries, quite like we do when she's talking about the Seneca region, it's the area above Caribou.
Thank you. It's part of the North Fork of the Feather River.
Right. Okay, so that, I think, is an action item as far as adding these proposals to the IRWM plan.
It is, so the recommended action is to adopt a resolution, including the 8 projects that we reviewed into the 2016 RWMG plan, thereby making them eligible for funding opportunities through the DWR RWMG program.
Given this Firewise, is there some source of accounting where a person can really look at the efficiency of these programs? I mean, I look at the organizations involved, and then I'm curious what the product is when you're done.
Okay, so Department of Conservation, who funded the original big watershed program in the 90s, has just gotten some preliminary results from a contract that they let with Sierra Institute to evaluate the performance of these projects, right? And how much did investing in watershed coordinators bring in resources into the areas through their work, and how many jobs were created and all that sort of thing. We don't have a final report, but apparently the leveraging capacity of empowering these coordinators is on the order of 5 to 10 times what you put in, you get back out in terms of projects and coordination. And so that's the biggest evaluation we've seen, because the program went on so long, and it's been long enough that you can see that it had legs, or it did something or didn't something. So the Department of Conservation head, David Bunn, who has property up in Red Clover Valley, he is the person that's reviewing and adopting policies related to that. And what we heard is he's very favorably impressed, not only with that assessment, but with our IRWM plan. He read the whole thing cover to cover, all the appendices, which what other human being would do that. And based on those kinds of things, he is willing to advocate with the state on further commitments to fund those kind of coordination efforts, because they generate real dollars. You have people with the right grants, pull people together, do the performance, all the things that we're asking for in these projects. So I think that's the only assessment we really have so far, but it was extremely favorable use of public money.
And you say you can find that on Sierra Institute's website?
Not yet, see, he's just, Department of Conservation just got the draft. I
Okay.
think it's still an internal draft.
Okay.
But, you know, since I try and keep my ear to the ground, I've heard nothing but favorable interest by the Department of Conservation, who would coordinate a similar such program in the future.
Okay.
And that's all really I know, yeah.
I missed last meeting, so apologies. Are you talking about, like, you know, the dollars, like a lot of these forest health projects are costing, and what the benefit is? Is that?
Yes, yes, and relative to the methodologies and means, i.e., you know, going through government, going through private, comparing it to both. But so many of these, I see them so bloated. And I remember once sitting in a meeting with the individuals telling me that they took the last grant to apply for the next grant. And, you know, I just look for efficiencies, as in, you put a buck out there, I want to get more than a buck back, I'm going to be out of business.
You know,
And a lot of people forget that there is a finite amount of money out there to do it.
right. But
So I encourage, I'm not against the process.
No, I get you. You know, I think it's tough to quantify. You know, you have scientists saying, hey, you remove some trees, you're gonna get more water down the creeks. You know, Butte County has its water department. We could ask, I mean, we have Kelly Peterson here, and I don't mean to put Kelly on the spot, she's newer, but we could have Christina Buck, who's our scientist, come up and maybe give a presentation.
I think it would be fabulous, because as a farmer, you have to understand my background. We've used transevaporation or evapotranspiration, whichever you want to call it, for 20 years. Now suddenly we got 55 gallons a day, you can't flush your toilet the day you do your laundry, and yet you've got billions of gallons of water sucked up in this brush. And even the state has fully acknowledged that it's absurd to lose billions of gallons to brush and then say wildfires are a benefit, when I haven't seen a wildfire yet that didn't incinerate everything around it, because we're comparing them to wildfires 50 years ago, where you burn through an annual brush.
And
Now you end up with moonlight and scorched earth.
I fully agree. You know, the other suggestion is maybe, you know, the Sierra Nevada Conservancy has moved to the WIP, the Watershed Improvement Program. And, you know, their staff seems always available, and they might, you know,
Well,
be
it-
worthy to request that they come and give kind of a presentation on, you know, the bang for the buck for what seems to be going forward
Yeah.
in state and the funding of a lot of fuel reduction
Now,
efforts. And
you may be familiar with, at Merced, I don't know who the professor is. I was given that information out of Sacramento, but Merced, UC Merced was doing basically the first real serious evapotranspiration analysis of the forest. And, you know, I don't know why there isn't a single program here to get a decent mapping to show how absurd that management is. When you're losing that much water, producing that much CO2 that you're complaining about, and incinerating your forest at the same time. Doesn't make much sense. So that's why I look for the, and I haven't seen anybody want to map it. Even Merced was having trouble getting money to pursue, and now with drones, you could map a hell of a lot. in a hurry.
Trina, you first and then Leah.
We agree.
Leah.
You know, in our IRWM plan, we had Burkhard Baum as one of our scientists, and he's a groundwater guy. And he didn't try and track a molecule of water, you know, all the way down to the creek, because our water system's too big. But he did prove that if you thin to a certain level, you are gonna increase infiltration and reduce evapotranspiration.
Huge.
And he did do a calculation of what that could do, mainly in the northern part of the district, up in your territory. Down, when you get down around Sierra Valley, it isn't so big, but up in the north, it's substantial. So we do have some information, but he wasn't trying to tie a project to a drop of water, because that's really hard in a watershed this big.
Well, I guess when you map, what you do is you pick something, you map it. You've got your transpiration.
And we have a LiDAR project that did get funded, and so we've flown the forest. So we're making incremental progress.
That's what I'm saying. It's kind of like early on. I'd just like to see a project
Yeah, we're
really
getting-
pushed it.
Yeah, we're getting there.
Okay.
And I agree with what you say as well, and in addition to that, if you thin to a certain level, it also prevents those catastrophic fires.
Yes.
Which wipe the landscape clean,
And
and
the little
that,
animals are happy too.
and it creates runoff. So there is no infiltration, no leaf to hold that water to drip down layer after its saturation isn't at that point. So
It's healthy.
in addition to what you said, I think that is also a huge part of, it contributes, restoring watersheds in these upper headwaters really contributes to base flows we've seen in a number of areas, which, you know, helps with runoff and groundwater supply as well.
And what always worries you is when you see 250 acres, and that's a substantial project, although I had orchards bigger than that. And then I'm looking at how many million acres we got to deal with.
Right.
There's not enough money in the world.
And enough money for it to happen, and how it's gonna happen is a question of, once you scorch it, then go back like the private guys, at least stick something in the dirt, and try and get it to grow back, and then control burn.
Through succession.
That's the only way you're gonna
Right.
control it. There was a stat, one stat, and I'll just leave that with my own comment, several years ago, and I don't remember which fire it was, that Idaho recognized that there was more pollution at that moment in time from the collective fires than there was in the entire nation in all forms of transportation for a year. That's ugly.
Okay, getting off our stated
Well, I didn't see that project.